What if the idea of atoms didn't begin in a laboratory, but in human consciousness thousands of years ago? Before microscopes existed, before electricity, before modern science even had a language for particles, ancient thinkers were already asking a dangerous question. What is reality made of? In modern physics, we talk about atoms, quantum fields, and energy vibrations. These ideas shape everything we know about the universe. But in ancient India, long before the scientific method, philosophers described something called anu, invisible, indivisible units that combine to form matter. Coincidence? Philosophy? Or something more mysterious? Tonight, we're not just comparing ancient wisdom with modern science, we are exploring why humanity keeps returning to the same questions about existence, matter, and the observer. Because the deeper science goes into the atom, the more reality begins to look philosophical. And the deeper philosophy goes into consciousness, the more it begins to sound like physics. This is the story of atoms, observers, and a mystery that connects the ancient world to the quantum age.
Vedas versus modern atomic theory. Part 1. The question hidden in dust. The universe began with a sound. Or at least, that's what the old texts said. Not an explosion, not fire, not light. A sound. Om. Before stars existed, before atoms formed, before time could be measured, there was vibration. A frequency, a pulse moving through nothingness. Modern physics calls it energy. Ancient sages called it creation. And somewhere between those two ideas lies a mystery no one has solved. In 2027, Daniel Carter sat alone in the basement archive of Redwood University, scrolling through scanned manuscripts that nobody else cared about. He wasn't supposed to be here. Technically, the archive was restricted to faculty researchers. But Daniel had discovered that the night security guard preferred watching baseball highlights instead of checking ID cards. Daniel wasn't a physicist, not officially. He was a graduate student in comparative philosophy who had accidentally taken one elective course in particle physics. That single class had changed everything. Because it had introduced him to atoms. And atoms had introduced him to doubt. Everything around him, the wooden desk, the flickering monitor, even his own hands, was made of invisible particles constantly moving in empty space. Not solid, not continuous, just patterns. That idea alone felt strange enough. But what bothered him more was something his professor had said casually during a lecture. The idea of indivisible particles is not uniquely modern. Ancient Indian philosophers proposed something similar thousands of years ago. Daniel couldn't stop thinking about that sentence, so he began searching. On the monitor in front of him was a translation of an ancient Sanskrit text connected to Vedic philosophy. The words were poetic, symbolic, and difficult to interpret, but one concept appeared again and again. Anu, a particle so small it could not be divided, invisible, eternal, fundamental. Daniel leaned back in his chair. That sounded familiar, very familiar. In modern science, atoms were once believed to be indivisible too. The word atom itself meant uncuttable. Later, scientists discovered electrons, protons, and neutrons, then quarks, then quantum fields. The deeper they looked, the stranger matter became. But the question remained,
What is the smallest thing that exists? Or does smallest even mean anything?
The archive room smelled like old paper and dust. A single yellow lamp cast long shadows across metal shelves filled with forgotten books. Daniel opened another document. This one described matter as combinations of tiny units that joined and separated endlessly, forming all physical objects. He whispered the words to himself: combination, separation, transformation. It sounded less like religion and more like chemistry, or physics, or something in between. Daniel minimized the manuscript and opened his physics notes. On the screen appeared diagrams of atomic structures, orbitals, probability clouds. Nothing like the neat circles shown in school textbooks. Atoms weren't solid spheres. They were mostly empty space, with particles appearing and disappearing according to probability. Reality wasn't made of things. It was made of behavior. That idea disturbed him because it sounded philosophical, too philosophical. Upstairs, thunder rolled across the sky. The old university building creaked as rain began hitting the windows. Daniel barely noticed. He had found something new, a reference to a philosopher named Kannada, not a country, a person, an ancient thinker who proposed that reality was built from indivisible particles long before microscopes existed. Daniel clicked another file. The translation described 6 categories of reality: substance, quality, motion, universals, particularity, and inherence. It felt oddly systematic, almost scientific. But how could someone thousands of years ago imagine particles they couldn't see? That question bothered Daniel more than anything else. Lightning flashed outside. For a moment, the archive room turned completely white, then dark again. Daniel's screen flickered, and when it stabilized, something strange appeared. A file he hadn't opened. A scan of a handwritten notebook. Not ancient, not translated. English. Dated 1897. Daniel frowned. That year mattered. 1897 was when J.J. Thomson discovered the electron, the moment atoms stopped being indivisible. He opened the notebook. The handwriting was uneven, as if written during travel. The first line read, "I believe the ancient texts were not describing atoms as objects, but as ideas." Daniel sat up straight. His heartbeat quickened. Rain intensified outside, tapping against the basement window like impatient fingers. The notebook continued. "If matter is ultimately vibration, then the atom is not a particle, but a pattern." Daniel whispered the sentence again. A pattern, not a particle. That sounded like quantum theory. But this notebook existed decades before quantum mechanics was fully developed. How?
He scrolled further. The notebook referenced experiments with electricity, magnetism, and light. Observations about how matter behaved differently when measured. Daniel's stomach tightened. Observer effect. Wave-particle duality. Ideas that wouldn't become mainstream until the 20th century. Yet here they were, scribbled in fading ink. The final page of the notebook had only one sentence. "Science will rediscover what wisdom once understood." Daniel stared at it for a long time. The archive room suddenly felt colder, not because the heater had stopped, because something didn't make sense. If ancient philosophers imagined atoms and early scientists suspected reality was vibration, then why did these ideas appear and disappear across history like forgotten knowledge? Why did discovery feel like remembering? The basement lights flickered again. This time they stayed dim. Daniel looked around the silent archive shelves. Thousands of books, centuries of ideas, most unread, most forgotten. He realized something unsettling. Knowledge doesn't disappear because it's wrong. Sometimes it disappears because it arrives too early. Thunder shook the building. The computer screen went black. For 3 seconds, Daniel saw only his reflection. Then the screen turned back on by itself. A new document opened automatically. No title, no author, just a single line of text. "Do you want to see the first atom?" Daniel froze. He had not touched the keyboard. And then, slowly, the archive door behind him creaked open.